Cheer, cheer the red and the white, honor the name by day and by night, lift that noble banner high, shake down.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Swans Bigfooty Podcast. My name is Bonz. Joining me tonight is SM.
Hey guys.
And Swansrule.
Welcome back to me.
Yeah, well, chose a good week to come back, didn't you?
Yep.
Let's just hope you're our lucky charm for the rest of the season. We certainly needed you last week.
We won't lose this week, I guarantee.
Perfect.
It's always a positive.
Well, now that we're actually getting onto the topic, may as well go with highlights and lowlights from the weekend. Swansrule, do you want to take it away?
So highlights. Well, if we're going for a Swan-specific highlight, I guess Rhys Shaw. I thought, at times last year he looked done, but I thought he was one of the few players who stood up and seemed to give a rat's for the whole game, and he played pretty well. And the other positive is, well, we're seventh still, and if the final started tomorrow, we play Carlton, which would probably win, so that's pretty good. Still in the top 8. Low light, the split round doesn't work for me. It's such a nothing start. I'd rather just crack into it, because now I've got another week of hearing about how bad we were. And a Swan sort of low light, obviously, was just the way that we lost and the manner we played was just abysmal. And it's left a sour taste in my mouth.
Okay, SM, your highlight and lowlight from the weekend?
Swan specific, I guess S0100 stole mine, which was Rhys Shaw. So I guess I'll talk about Cunningham. I thought had quite a good start to the game. It was good to see him carry on his pre-season form. He tailed off a little bit, but can't hold it against him because so did the entire team. So I guess I'll single him out for a bit of praise as well. He really impressed me with his display. Low light, where do you start with a low light from the weekend? I'll go with the fact that the rain absolutely ruined the end of the first quarter to the point we had to go hide in a food shed, and which basically got half flooded. Thought the game was actually going to get called off at one point, so that wasn't too much fun at quarter time. But I'll go with that as a low light for now before we get into the main stuff in a little bit.
Well, my highlight from the weekend was Layla's first game. It wasn't the worst first game for the Swans. And he was a lot more solid than I expected him to be. Low light, pretty much everything. I guess maybe the biggest low light for me would have been just our disposal efficiency. It was shocking. We've struggled with our disposal over the last year and a bit now, but on the weekend it was just appalling. We dominated GWS in the first week of the preseason, and they had a very similar squad to what they played this weekend. And we had a weaker squad. And a disposal into the forward 50, I haven't seen anything so appalling in AFL's country level.
When's the last time we won a game in the wet? I can't remember off the top of my head, but
I think we have recently started winning a couple of games in the wet. From memory, was the Adelaide game last year.
Yeah, the Adelaide game was in the wet, and we also had... Was it the West Coast game the year before?
Might have been. I mean, I do agree though. We are pretty poor in the wet. I don't think we adapt very well, but it's not as bad as it used to be, thankfully.
Well, speaking of the Adelaide game, and I'm probably going off topic, but that to me is the last time we saw the Swans play really well. And I know we've won more than we lost since then, but we looked like back-to-back chance then.
And you know what the factor was? Guess who came in for the next game we played? Mr. Tippett. And it changed our shape, it changed our setup, and the same thing's happening now with Buddy.
We've got the same issue we had a few years ago when Barry Hall. We just bomb it to him. We don't put our heads down and actually look for a target. Even last year.
One thing I would say, and I was talking to Von about this after the game, we went out and recruited 2 key forwards in 2 consecutive years because we felt that filled a need. But we had won the grand final with a great hard-pressing midfield, rebounding midfield that was kicking a lot of goals. It was a very unpredictable setup. Why did we feel the need to so drastically change our game plan?
Maybe because we felt we had fluked 2012 grand final. I'm not saying that we did, like,
Well,
I'm
you
not
have to-
personally
you have
saying
to
it, but
evolve.
we weren't the
You have
most
to get
dominant team throughout the year. We kind of wanted to maybe make ourselves the most dominant team.
But on the point of constantly needing to evolve, you look at Hawthorn winning the grand final last year, and who have they gone out and recruited in the off-season? They haven't made any significant changes to their game plan since perhaps 2010, and they've made 2 grand finals in a row. They've recruited Lake, yeah, for sure, but apart from him, they haven't drastically changed their game style.
But the thing,
McAvoy, yeah.
I think Hawthorn did is what we did up to 2012, getting role players that you need. Like Lake is not at his peak, but he feels the need of Hawthorn. And we got, going back a long time, we got Richards because he filled a need that we had, and we got Everett. We didn't go target the best players in the league. We just got specific players who filled a gap in the team, and that's what they're doing. They haven't really gone out and got a Dale Thomas or a high-profile recruit. But yeah, the Franklin one just feels like every week the club bring out a video like, what's Buddy up to this week? He's walking around in his TikToks, or he's signing a few autographs. Like, all we want to see is this high-profile forward in the video because that's all Swans fans care about. And
It's kind of
like
insulting in a way.
it's like we just got the big toy because it was out there and to stop GWS getting it. And Tippett was sort of like, well, we can get him for a second-round draft pick, so why not? Let's get him. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't think we need both.
I don't
necessarily.
think we can comment and fully judge both Tippett and Franklin until, one, we've seen them play together, and we've given them some time to actually settle in. I mean, at least with Franklin on the weekend, he actually made an effort. He had a few tackles. He was trying to create some space. He probably put in more effort than most players on the field for us.
I feel
Yeah,
sorry for him.
He only had 7 touches, didn't he?
Yeah, but he was stuck in the forward 50 with that atrocious disposal coming in.
Oh, even Reed, who was pretty invisible all game, had 10 touches. I mean, you can't really... And
Yeah,
Rowan
and
had 9 touches.
Reed
Keith
was
had
leading
7
up the
touches in one
ground.
quarter.
I guess for 10 million over 9 years, probably expecting to work up the ground a little bit more. If the delivery's poor, maybe go and get the ball yourself. But
I think
he
it
did
was
have
the
Phil
same.
Davis's hand imprinted on his guts probably by the end of the game.
Speaking of, though, I don't know if either of you heard the news, but Davis has been admitted to hospital with a really bad kidney injury, which he apparently suffered in the first quarter. So I do want to give a shout-out to his effort to play on for the whole game and play on Franklin, which is pretty impressive.
No, Phil Davis had a fantastic game on the weekend, whilst he may have dragged and scragged a little on Franklin. He did win a few solid one-on-ones, and he's been a quality player for a few years, even when he was at Adelaide. It's just now he's actually fit. If he was fully fit, he'd be one of the best defenders in the competition. I've got no concerns with Franklin getting beat on the weekend.
One thing I did want to bring up about the weekend, I mean, because we're going to say that Franklin didn't get much delivery, is our midfield was really down on numbers. You look at their top 3 disposal winners of Treloar, Ward and Cornelio getting 34, 31 and 27, compared to Parker, Kennedy and Mitchell getting 23, 22 and 21. It's just kind of...
The biggest
Says
issue
so,
we've
doesn't
got
it?
with our midfield right now is it's so one-paced. And who was tagging Ward?
No clue.
Like, they said they didn't want Ryan O'Keefe in the team because there wasn't a matchup for him. Honestly thought Ward would have been a pretty good matchup for O'Keefe if we had the tag.
But then when he came on, he was a shadow of himself.
He wasn't that bad. He got 7 disposals in a
Yeah,
quarter
but
and
most
actually
of them
made some
crap.
effort.
It was hardly worth bringing him on. Like, what's happened? I thought even a few weeks ago you wouldn't have thought about leaving him out of best 22 if you were drawing it up. And then he's not in it. Give me a break. That's weird. And then he plays and Jack's out. That was all. The whole day just had a weird vibe from as soon as that happened.
Yeah, look, in all honesty, I think he can't be the sub or an emergency in the next game. He's our main tagger. We've got to use him as one. Like, if Bird gets beat, we need a backup option. Unless we move Smith into the midfield.
What I don't understand is why it took so long to bring him on. I would have brought him on halfway through the third quarter, let him work into the game a bit more, and you might have actually seen him, do something effective.
We would have to have a player shot dead in the middle of the field early on for Longmire to ever bring the sub on earlier than 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, I reckon.
Yeah.
He's reluctant to pull that string ever. So,
I
there's
don't
subs
have an
coming on
issue
in the
with
fourth
him.
quarter.
I personally don't have an issue with him, actually, not pulling the trigger on an early sub. Like, if we were completely out of it, then yes, we probably would want him to, but the game was still close at the time and we were up. If we had made the sub and then we had another injury, then we would have had some issues.
I guess my point is if they used their sub in the second quarter, which I think was Palmer going off, you've kind of got in the back of your mind that we then had the power to use the sub whenever we wanted, and they couldn't really counter it with their own sub. So it wasn't as if holding off until the fourth quarter gave us any advantage. It really just meant that we had tired legs for that much longer in the game.
What would have happened if we had pulled our sub and then LRT had still gotten injured, though?
But you would have subbed off LRT in the third quarter, I guess.
I have a feeling
I think he was always going to be the one going off.
Maybe, I thought
think it comes back to the main problem I had with the whole game is that they, until GWS hit the front, I think the Swans just thought they would win the game. And I don't think they worried too much about the sub because I felt like the whole team played as though eventually we'll win this game. We only have to be out here because we're a better side. And that's what disappointed me the most on the weekend was that the attitude they conveyed. And I guess I'm just into things, but that's how it looked watching on TV, that everyone just thought it would happen, apart from Shaw and Laidler, who gave a crap. That's about it.
And you know what really surprised me was that we actually lost every single quarter except the first quarter. I mean, you say going into that three-quarter time break that we should have won the game, but the trend was actually suggesting GWS was on the up from the second quarter, and they just continued that trend.
Well,
and that really surprised me.
With the second quarter and early in the third quarter, we were dominating. We just couldn't hit the scoreboard. Our kicking for goal was atrocious, and our disposal into the forward 50 was even worse.
I guess that's what I'm saying, is that the signs were there from early on that we were really not looking, on, and that could be kind of seen in the way we were bombing it in.
You know we're having an off day when players such as Jetta and McVeigh, who are probably our two best players going into the forward 50, weren't lowering their heads and they were just bombing it long. If we're going to be playing players like Lance Franklin and Kurt Tippett in our team, we still have to lower our eyes.
And it doesn't seem like we know how to do that.
Yeah, I really hope that we're doing skills training for the next 2 weeks.
There seems to be this obsession with pace, injecting pace into the team and creating space for them to run into, but teams no longer allow Lewis Jetta or even Gary Rowan, for that instance, to get that space to run onto. We never had space or time to set up kicks in the forward line. They're always rushed high bombs. And GWS had the pace and ran off us a hell of a lot more. And I think Jetta needs to do something to reinvent himself because he hasn't been effective in a game for a while. And I know he was injured a lot of last year, but 2012 he was pretty much all Australian until the last few rounds. And we need that Jetta back. And I haven't seen him for a long time.
I wonder if it's a confidence thing. I'm not actually sure what it is, or whether he's overconfident.
I think it might be a confidence issue. I agree with you there, Hassan. If you look at his first year, he just couldn't kick a goal and kicked almost 19 behinds in a row.
Yeah.
That was a confidence issue. He had chances, he was just not confident about going about them. It's the same issue now, just slightly further up the field. When was the last time we actually saw him take someone on?
Yeah, we were commenting on that at the game, that the last time that we saw him actually run off his man was, I can't even remember when. He used to run off his man and always have that extra step of pace on them, and he just doesn't seem to do it anymore.
No, the only thing he did do was burn teammates twice and shoot ridiculous shots for goal. That's about all he does. He doesn't take off.
Oh, that first shot for goal. Who was it that he had 20 metres out by themselves? McVeigh, was it?
Yeah, you're going to hear about it if you burn McVeigh because he'll have his hands on his hips yelling at everyone pretty quick.
I'm one of McVeigh's biggest fans. I'm not going to lie, but Jesus Christ, he had a freaking shocker on the weekend.
Yeah, that was actually one thing I wanted to bring up was that kick out of defence late in the last quarter, which really sealed it for me that we'd lost the game. That kick out from the behind went, floater up the middle, straight to GWS, turnover and goal. With Jack out of the team, I mentioned it on the board. We've had Bolton, Kirk and Goods who've sort of stood up when the going gets tough. And, Jack's almost the obvious successor to that. And with him out of the team, you kind of look to McVeigh to lead the team, and he just went missing.
The other player I also want to talk about was Kennedy. Great first half. He went missing.
Yes. Kennedy and McVeigh had very disappointing, and Hanbury to an extent, in terms of disposal numbers, all very disappointing.
Every possession Kennedy gets is contested. He's actually a pretty effective deliverer of the ball, but no one goes in and gets the ball for him. He has to do all the hard work, and he gets scrounged around. I have a bit more sympathy for him than a McVeigh, who was just lousy, decided that kicking in wide bombs to the left every single time is ineffective, so let's shank one into the 20 metres out in front of goal. Crap, but Kennedy doesn't concern me as much, but I'm just concerned with the way we use Kennedy a bit more. Trying to free him up would be good, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Like, we've got Kennedy at the bottom of the packs constantly, every single game. I'd like us to start using Mitchell and Parker there a bit more instead of outside midfielders.
Yep.
Allow them to actually start getting their own clearances and give Kennedy a bit more of a break and rest him up forward, because as we saw early on, he's very adaptable up forward.
So I guess the other thing too, though, before we get too into the Swans side of everything, which I guess we have, is I would acknowledge how well the young GWS side sort of ran over the top of it. And I can see why, as a neutral, if you're watching that game, you jump on the underdog and think, well, hey, it's got that buddy, he didn't go to them, he went to us storyline. So it would have been pretty exciting for everyone but us as Swans fans, I think, watching them storm home. So full credit to them and the way they stopped us from playing the game we want to play.
The most impressive thing about GWS on the weekend, whilst everyone always talks about Cameron and Patton, and then you're going to have Boyd coming through and everything, was I felt on the weekend was the first time their midfield really stood up. These high draft picks are going to be something else in a few years' time.
It's scary how good they're going to be. I up until this game, I'd always kind of thought
Gold Coast were going to be better.
Teams, but Gold Coast and GWS, they're going to be good teams, but teams like Hawthorn, Sydney, Freo and so on would always still be that step ahead. But after that display, I'm not so sure anymore.
I think it was the challenge will be for them to keep that group together and avoid. It's an interesting topic, cost of living and everything, but keep that group away from home in Sydney. All of those young stars who will be courted by other clubs. The other point I thought about GWS was it was really rubbed home that we don't have Mumford anymore. The way having his aggression and stuff was always so nice on your own side, but playing against it is horrid.
I will.
Cameron, how come it looked so easy for them and they looked so clean, and we have one of the supposed best forwards in the comp up there, and it looked every time was a struggle for Franklin to get anything going, but Cameron could just make stuff happen. Patton looked like a future superstar. That was frustrating.
Yeah. The other thing that was I wanted to praise GWS for was their contested work. They out-tackled us and had more contested possessions than us. You could argue perhaps that meant that we were first to the ball, but I think GWS were actually first to the ball on a number of occasions, and just their physical presence for a young team was really impressive to see. So you do have to give them a bit of credit where it's due.
I'm not taking anything away from GWS. They were absolutely amazing on the weekend, and they do deserve all the credit for the win. They were the better team. But how much is that actually due to us just being in holiday mode?
Yeah. I think to an extent we did just take them for granted, and we assumed that it would just be another win because of the way that we performed in pre-season. But you can't take these things for granted anymore.
No, until three-quarter time, to me, it felt like round one last year where, as I said, the stats show that they were coming, but I felt like we could have just turned it on. But as a fan, that's one thing to feel, but the players can't be out there thinking that. And it was only when that panic set in and it was just too late. We couldn't handle it.
I guess that's the thing, because, late in the last quarter, you kind of expect, like I was saying, you have your superstars who will turn it on and drag you across the line, but it just didn't seem to have anyone out there. You look across the ground, no one was really that candidate to step up and suddenly make a difference. We didn't have our Kieran Jack or Adam Goods or Jude Bolton.
Well, it was really hard giving the Bigfooty votes, thinking of five players who stood out enough. I went short.
I still haven't given my votes yet. I'm undecided.
But it's really hard. No one really stood out. You could look at Shaw and Laidler tried hard, but they weren't starring or anything. Mitchell got a lot more of the ball than I thought he did to the naked eye, but no one played well.
I'd possibly give a vote to, and I might get blasted by you two for this, but I do think Pike did still deserve a vote. Without playing a second ruckman, he carried the ruck for the first 2.5 quarters and did quite well. Like, actually had more hit-outs than Mumford until he just died on his feet because he wasn't getting a break.
No, I thought Pike did his job. That's a fair comment.
Yes. Sorry.
Like, everyone's talking on about how good Mumford and everything was. I think Pike actually outpointed him early on in the game. It's just, we can't give him a break. We've got to bring in Derricks or...
But the point I made last year when everyone was saying Pike was the better ruckman was that I still thought Mumford was the better tack ruckman in terms of capitalising on those hit-outs. And I still stand by that. I thought Pike played a really good game on him until he, as you said, he ran out of puff. But I just wish we had have kept Mumford somehow. I don't know how, but yeah, I would have given him the years. We need another ruckman. And I guess the plan is to Tippett is that other ruckman, which is fine. That'll work. But
Tippett's a very good tap ruckman, actually. Even at showing for us, it was good for us when he had minor stints there last year, but when he played at Adelaide in the ruck, he was superb there.
And I mean, Derricks looked alright pre-season, but the idea that a Richmond reject is going to come in and have an impact is a little bit laughable, perhaps. But we'll see. Time will tell.
Reece Shaw had an impact for us, and we were laughing at him being a Collingwood reject at the time.
Yeah,
so.
but he wasn't a hopeless Collingwood player. He got regular footy. Derricks has struggled to get into that squad.
It was pretty hopeless, and Richmond do have a pretty good ruckman in Marriage, so it isn't too bad, I guess. SM, I believe you had a few statistics you wanted to bring up from the match.
Yeah, I mean, I've already sort of brought up most of them, but the other really interesting one was just how dominated we were on the scoreboard in that last quarter, with them having twice as many scoring shots, us kicking 6 goals forward to our 5 behinds, which was quite startling to look at. And it was, as I said, in terms of the fact that they won all 3 of the quarters after the first quarter, that look, at the game, as you guys say on TV, at the game you kind of watch and think, oh, we're going to run over them in the end. But looking back at the stats for the match, it just kind of drifted further and further towards them. The other stat I did really want to bring up was everyone on the board's potting Hanbury, and in terms of his raw disposal numbers, I think perhaps it's fair enough, because as a midfielder in the engine room, you expect him to 20, 25 disposals, but even though he couldn't get enough of the ball, he did get 9 tackles, which was a team high, which I do think needs to be praised, because I think a lot of people are suggesting he didn't make a full effort, and I don't think you can really accuse a player who gets 9 tackles of not making an effort.
I get sick of the potting people on the board, but I won't go individuals, but the crap that he didn't care because he's got that haircut, like that Franklin's got a beard. I mean, who cares? It doesn't have anything to do with his effort on the field. It doesn't mean you're arrogant. Yeah, I agree. That's 9 tackles was fine. He could have played better, but I don't doubt that he tried.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that after the game, the general consensus has been that we just didn't bring enough effort to the table. But with I think if we'd recorded this last night, that would have been my main issue with the team. But with a little bit more hindsight and a bit of a cooler mind, you can give a lot more credit to GWS than perhaps initially you might have, because they played a brilliant game, and you can't take that away from them.
You didn't think we'd ever lose it all pre-season, and we knew we're playing them round 1, and you just want to try to explain it even to yourself, as silly as that sounds. You can't. Yeah, it's like, how did that really happen? And then you seem to know everyone who's a Hawthorn supporter and that sort of shit. You cop it. It's just like, well, how did this happen? But time will tell as to how good they are and whether this was a blip on the radar, I guess.
And you look at their fixture, and unbelievably, they could actually start the season 4-0, because they've got their next game is St Kilda, then they play Melbourne at Spotless Stadium, and then they play the Western Bulldogs. So, if everything lines up for them, they could be, sort of top 4 come, the start of round 5, which would be unbelievable.
It's just as likely that this was their win and they played their grand final and fall apart, but I don't know. But yeah, I would take nothing away from them, and I mean, I tried to after the game, probably. I don't know. That was one of the worst feelings as a Swans fan I've had in a long time, since like the Wooden Spoon days, really. And I can't really put my finger on it other than complacency, I guess, as a fan group. Just you thought you were going to win it.
I didn't even feel angry about the match. I just thought I was just sitting there in disbelief. I honestly thought it hadn't happened. Thought it hadn't happened.
What I found really interesting, though, is it's definitely the start of the rivalry, which is always, in a way, a good thing, because before this, it was a very manufactured rivalry, but watching all those GWS fans getting up and cheering their team as the siren went and reading their song off the board as they learnt it for the first time, you could really feel a bit of stirring and a bit of anger towards them. So, I mean, I think someone on the board mentioned it would be great if in a few years' time we can fill out ANZ Stadium and have a proper sort of derby going on.
That would be good.
I'm actually...
That spot was
very weird. It was a very weird feeling because I've been there for a few other events, Easter Show and Big Day Out, Soundwave, that sort of thing. It's obviously a very new stadium, but as I mentioned in my low light, it was a bit funny to see, these supposedly high quality facilities flooding from the rain and losing power and all that sort of thing, so it doesn't seem too top quality. And they only have one screen, which I found very annoying because we were sat right in front of it. Yeah. So looking down the other end of the ground, you couldn't just make out the players or anything, and there was no screen to help. But, I mean, look, for what it is, for, a small boutique sort of stadium, I think it's pretty impressive.
The one thing we haven't touched on, actually, is how bizarre was it to see players go off at quarter time?
Yeah.
You just don't hear it. Like, it was actually on the commentary was like, well, this game is on.
We honestly didn't know if it would be, because the way the rain was, we went undercover with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter and felt a little bit silly to do it because it wasn't that heavy. But before long, the heavens just opened up, and the amount of lightning. Apparently, they found a lightning rod in the middle of the ground.
Yeah, that's true.
Off the stadium. So we honestly, as it stretched on, I think it was about 20 minutes. They waited. We weren't sure if it was going to go back on.
Because Cam Mooney picked it up or something. We didn't hit him, unfortunately, but he's still with us. But it was a bit weird. A lot of people were saying, stay on the ground, it's a winter sport, but I mean, it's pretty much an OHS thing. You don't want people flying playing football.
There were a couple of those lightning strikes got very, very close. So none of us were kind of complaining that they'd stopped play. We all kind of just accepted it. Visibility was horrendous as well. You, as a spectator, you wouldn't have been able to see the other end of the ground.
It's pretty shocking. Like, with all the lowlights and everything, I do believe we need to touch on what actually may be the biggest lowlight on the weekend, Johnson's injury.
Yes.
It seemed, just from the video highlights, just standard jump up third man in the contest and landed on his knee poorly. Would have done the knee for nearly any player in the game. It was just bad luck.
So this will be his third operation.
Third operation.
It's the other knee, isn't it?
I think it's the same knee. I think
we're getting mixed reports left, right, and centre about it. That's the thing. Like, Sydney have said it's his left knee, but we don't know which knee he did originally. I honestly thought it was his right.
2012 Grand Final. You thought, look, we have one of the best young, developed key position backmen of the future coming here, and then we haven't seen him since, basically. And it's just sad for any player like that, and it reminds me of like Menzel at Geelong. That's sad story. Yeah. But looking even at our backline, like Rampy's now playing third tall back, and it's just a big hole that he leaves. I was really hopeful of seeing this year to fix up the structure, and now we've got to come up with a plan B, which isn't Swan's forte at times.
The worst thing is that now LRT looks like he's injured as well, so we can't exactly throw LRT back and use him as the third tall.
It's the same curse as last year. It's last year all over again in terms of injuries to our tall players. And yeah, Menzel's the one I've definitely thought of in the aftermath of his injury, because I honestly, like you're saying, after the 2012 Grand Final, I honestly thought he'd be a 300-game player the way he started his career. And it's just tragic for any young player, Menzel as well at Geelong, to see players get this sort of injury time and time again, because they really don't deserve it.
And not to get too dramatic, like AFL 360 style, but you have to question any player in that position's future, really. Like, is he going to be able to play AFL football? Because
mentally.
He'll never be the same physically. He's lost some key development years. So his career is not ever going to be what it was. And you've seen plenty of examples of players who just don't come back from it. So that's a concern.
There are some players that do come back from it.
Was it the first quarter in his return match?
Yeah.
First 10
He can't
minutes.
have any confidence in his knees now.
No. I mean, you look at someone like Dave Schwartz back in like 94 or whenever it was, looked like he'd be the next Wayne Carey. I mean, he came back, but he was never that same leaping, dynamic player. He was overweight, more of a bollocking, bash and crash type, and had an effective career, but it was never what it should have been. It's just, it's a sad tale. I don't wish it on any player at any club, even the ones I hate.
Yeah.
Look, I will say this as well. Before completely ruling him out and looking at previous cases, we also do have a genuine good case at our club with Malcheski.
That's a little bit different. I mean, I do agree, Matt. This is definitely an inspiration for AJ, but the fact that he's done them so rapidly in such quick succession and so soon into his comeback game, it just doesn't seem like it could have the same result.
Yeah. I don't know. Malcheski, he's probably never been the same player, but it's also a different role. He doesn't really play a lot of contested one-on-one footy. He's more a cleaner. Well, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but...
No, I understand, yeah.
No, I understand.
There's nothing positive about it at the moment. It's just, awful, really.
Do you reckon he's going to go... I mean, there's been suggestions which I can understand both ways, which would be do the traditional Rico, get the proper clean-up and just give him 14, 16 months off just to get him completely right? Or does he go the Lars, try and come back and try to get some sort of development, as you say, while he's still young, and try to make some sort of career? Because, like you said, I reckon if he does it again, that's got to be it.
I think we'll get it right. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not a surgeon, but I mean, was it the last that failed last year, or was it the other way around?
Also, a full reconstruction that failed.
Yeah,
It didn't hold after surgery, so...
Because the problem is everyone says don't go Lars because there's more chance of reoccurrence, but I reckon there's just as much reoccurrence on the traditionals. Because Malcheski's got a Lars in him at the moment, and he's been fine for, 2 years now, touch wood.
Yeah, it would be
tough.
tough.
You can almost roll the dice and have the Lars. You could always have it again, I guess.
I guess that's my theory. My theory, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's less recovery time, so even if you did it again, you just go for Lars again, I guess.
Yeah. It's not like anyone's going to take his spot, though, in the meantime, just looking at our key position backline depth, so...
I guess it's Laidler, isn't it? Laidler's his spot at the moment?
Yeah,
Laidler or Rampy, one or the other.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, as you say, you touched on the mental aspect, though, and I think that's what it'll be coming down to, really. Like, can he get himself mentally right to take the bars, come back and trust his knee? It's going to have to come down to that sort of issue, an individual thing. Selfishly, I'd like him to have the bars and get back as quick as possible, though.
He's one of my favourite players. I completely agree, yeah.
Whatever will give him the best career, and I guess you can't guarantee that either way.
Fingers crossed that we can just...
The other thing on injuries, if we can finish with AJ, not trying to take over, but did you guys, I guess you wouldn't have see Tippett's interview pre-game?
No, I missed that.
No, I missed it actually.
I sort of asked him when he'd be back, and he was a bit non-committal with a cheeky grin, so hopefully a couple of weeks. I guess hopefully he's right for Collingwood, but Goodsy was almost sort of like, oh, well, yeah, he started to run, but you never know, you've got to take it 1 week at a time. And I'm starting to have concerns over whether he'll be back anytime soon, really. I don't know what you guys read on that issue, but I think Tippett might be right soon, but Goods, I'm even slightly concerned we might never see him again.
I made a comment in, I think it was the Best 22 thread a while ago, and I know there was that thread that got started, I think it was last week, where the thread title's been changed to make it a bit more positive, but without sounding too downcast, I do honestly don't think we'll see Goods again. It's very Bradshaw-esque in terms of his knee. And I think he's just at that sort of age where it's not going to recover to what it needs to be to play AFL footy.
I'm personally... Look, personally, I don't have a lot of... I've got less hope for Goods now than I did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I wouldn't be against us as giving him 5-6 weeks without running and just putting that leg up and trying to get him fit for the end of the year. If we could give him just one farewell game at the SCG, that would be worth it.
Oh, look, I mean, if he can get fully fit, he could be an absolutely dangerous super sub, which could almost be the perfect role for him if he's got a knee that can't go for 4 quarters. So, I mean, there is still hope for him in that sense, but it's a pretty slim one, I think.
it just doesn't seem like that long ago. He played Collingwood, and commentators would talk, "Oh, this guy can play forever. He's still so fit." And it just shows you how quickly a player in his 30s can go to pot. So that's why you want to commit to a player for too long. I hope no clubs out there are thinking of doing that.
I can't believe a club could ever give someone a 9-year deal. I mean, I hope that never happens because you never know what's going to happen once they hit 30.
That's it. 1 minute they're right, the next they're gone. So
that being said,
out there listening, just don't do it.
That being said, you never know. He might 3 or 4 weeks from time actually recover and play the rest of the year. It's remote, but it's still a chance. He's on our list.
I hope I'm silly and he comes back and has a brilliant second half of the season.
Time will tell, reveal all, but I wonder how much he set himself back trying to get right for the finals last year when maybe he should have just put the cue in the rack and not tried to come back.
Fully agree with that. I actually can't argue with it in the slightest. I mean, if he has injured himself trying to go for a back-to-back premiership last year, where does that lead us to talk about a medical department not holding him back? I mean, we've all complained about them for years, not giving us solid time frames on injuries, but how much of our medical department has changed over years? I mean,
didn't our fitness guy go do some killer or something? The one that had given us such a good run with injuries.
Oh, day condition on every cricket team. Yeah, is he in Melbourne now?
I think he might be at Melbourne, yeah.
Yeah, he's left in Melbourne now.
Yeah, so I don't know. The hard thing, judges, as we all know, our medical staff will stay good 2 to 3 weeks, then it'll be 4 to 6 and 5 to 6. You never know what's going on, so we just don't know what happened to him last year or what they've been dealing with or how close they got him, but it's just frustration as a fan that they're not transparent at times. Whether they need to be, I don't know if they have to, really, but we're just guessing. I just want to see the great man back there because he still has a role to play in our best team. He's probably still on a few bucks as well.
He'd be on a fair quid. Anyways, we'll go on to the next topic now. We'll actually ask a few questions. We asked a question in our podcast discussion thread during the week. If we had
a jingle for this segment?
We've got to get a sponsor for it, I reckon.
We've got to get a sponsor for it. I'll see if I can find something during the week for the little jingle. But this week's question was, if we had a fully fit squad to choose from, who would be your 6 starting forwards and why? What tactics/structure would you employ for them? SM, what do you honestly believe were the best replies to this week?
Well, I'm going to try and not be too biased here, but I'm going to say Alan Lau, 34, had a great one because he included BJ in the front 6, but I reckon his forward setup's pretty spot on. Obviously, talking about Goods not making it back, as he says, he put in Reid perhaps instead, but actually, no, he's got Reid there. What am I saying? That front 6 is really tipped. Brandon Jack, Franklin, Goods and Rowan would be a very, very dangerous forward 6 because you've got the speed of Jack and the speed of Rowan mixed with the athleticism of Reid, Franklin and Rowan to really move up the ground and rope around to open up the space in the forward 50 for guys like Tippett and Goods. So I reckon that's probably the response that stood out for me.
In all honesty, whilst I mentioned his name quite thoroughly last week, the forward structure I really agreed with was the one from punts, with Tippett to play out of the goal square, Reid leading up higher up the field. I also do like the fact that he has included Goods. We are keeping some possibility he will play again this year. But he's actually managed to find a way to include all 4 of our tall players in the forward line and has come up with actual decent reasons as to why he wants them playing there. For instance, what he said about Franklin being 198 centimetres tall, but once the ball hits the deck, he becomes a rover as well. Defenders just can't go with him. I do like the way that Punz has talked about this. He has also mentioned BJ or Harry being unable to get a game if we are fully fit, and I agree with that. BJ's just too raw at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on what lineup you're going with, but I think guys like it's either going to sound like a Glenn or a Brandon Jack who makes that 6 spot because you need someone with that nuggety pressure player that they both provide. And I think with Punce's one, it's just a bit too tall. I mean, he's got McLennan there, so that's kind of that pressure player.
Punce wouldn't have too tall a forward line.
I mean, look, I know he likes to keep aware of how tall the forward line is, but he has gone pretty tall on there.
Good, to be fair to him, Goods and Rowan are pretty mobile goals when fit, I guess, but yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Well, talking about tall forward lines, we do have Grimlock's response as well. Reed, Tippett, LRT, Franklin Goods, and then McGlynn. Load up with 5 talls and chuck in a midget just to confuse things.
Jeez, no, I could just imagine just bang the ball into the 50 and everyone just spread out and leave one forward there just to pluck it. One each time. You could even try Pike up there and rest him.
Rest Pike, bring in a Derek Saw as a backup ruckman. 6 talls.
That would be very interesting to see.
I don't know. There's not really such thing as a forward 6 these days anyway with the way teams play, especially Sydney. Just to poo-poo the whole question, of course.
I think there's some very good responses though, so it was actually quite interesting to get people's thoughts on that. But yeah, no, I do agree. It's interesting. We'll either play with more than 6 or less than 6, but you don't really see the traditional 6 in the 50 at any one time anymore.
No, well, Carlton Port last night had about 4 full forwards at one stage, like pretty much in the goal square. It was an interesting structure at one point. Yeah,
do you reckon we could get any of their forwards up here to teach ours how to take a mark? Because, I mean, Westhoff and Butcher and Waite all taking great marks. That was actually a very depressing game to watch, just to kind of think back on our game and how poor our form. I mean, obviously they were completely dry under the roof and we were in the wet. But, yeah, very different sort of game.
No, the thing that stood out on the weekend was every team seemed to enter the forward line quicker than us, and then forwards could mark, and everyone looked faster. It was a depressing weekend of football watching as a Swans fan.
And what's really interesting is the 4 teams that lost are going to be really spewing that they lost, because in the end, all 4 games are really 50-50 games, because you could have easily seen, I mean, obviously not based on the way they played, but Collingwood going into that game, you could have made a case for them winning, and the same for Richmond, us, and Carlton. So,
my tipping went to pot in the weekend. So.
Well, it takes a sophisticated mind to pick out winners that, not all of us have it.
Do you tip GWS?
No, but I got the other 3, so I'll stick with those ones.
Yeah, okay. Tipping is a mugs game, I guess. It's interesting, all 4 teams who lost play each other next round. That's a Bruce McAvaney type stat for you there. Carlton play Richmond, Sydney play Collingwood.
It'd be hard to imagine Collingwood or us starting them 2, and I guess the same for Richmond and Carlton.
No, well, we know if we beat Collingwood at ANZ, we'll win the Premiership going on 2012 and 2005, so it'll all be revealed in 2 weeks' time where this season's going.
That is going to be one.
Either we give up on it or we pop the champagne, I guess.
Yep.
That is going to be one brutal match in a few weeks' time. I think both teams are going to come out breathing fire.
But if we lose that, I shudder to think where we're going. I know it's only round 2, but...
I'd be tempted to ask the dreaded question, where are the Sydney Swans at if we lose the Collingwood game? I honestly wouldn't know where we're at.
Well,
it's a question that needs an answer.
We've got semblance of a 9-year plan, just need to put something around it.
Yeah. That being said, in 2006 we did start the season 0-3, and in 2005 I believe it was 1-4. So, no matter how bad we start the season, there is always still hope.
Yeah, but in 1993 we started 0-1, and what, do we win 1 more game?
Yeah, I mean, people say not to read too much into games too early in the season, but I think it was just the manner in which we played. You have to hope it was just us being complacent.
It's just put this little tiny silly flicker in the back of your head that we've just signed this guy for 9 years, for 10 million. What if we have a shit year and don't even make the finals? How embarrassing is that going to be?
And that's the worry, is that there was so much pressure on him coming in, and it's only going to intensify now that we play so poorly, and that's not going to help. I mean, perfect situation, he comes out and kicks 6 or 7 against the Pies and we all forget about it, but who knows?
we've just lost the team he turned down, and now we play the team, our bogey team. It's just all, at least we've got a week not to worry about it, I guess.
That's true. Now, we may as well go on to the question we'll be asking this week. SM, did you want to say it, or do you want me to?
I believe the question is, where does everyone think GWS are at now after that performance? Not specifically in terms of against us, but just in general, where do you think they'll finish this year, and what sort of aim they have, I guess. So I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that in the discussion thread.
We'll add the question into the discussion thread as well, just in case you guys haven't been able to listen to this podcast till the end. We'll figure out who you are if you haven't. Trust me, we'll chase you down.
We'll come into your house and rub shit on your balls.
Well, I mean, as I can speak for himself there, I think I might be a bit more civil than that. Like the Tasmanians.
Anyways, everyone, thank you for listening.
On a lovely note.
Yeah, we're ending on a lovely note. Everyone, thank you for listening to this week's podcast. I am Bonz. Joining me tonight was SM and Swansrule. Thank you and good night.